call this meeting to order. This is the meeting 35, number 35 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. I'd like to remind committee members that today's meeting is going to be webcast and will be available via the House of Commons website. Today we're studying the main estimates 2021-22, vote 1 under the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying, and votes 1 and 5 under the Offices of the Information Privacy Commissioner of Canada. Today, for our witnesses to carry us through the first hour is Carolyn Menard, who's the Information Commissioner of Canada, and we'd like to welcome the Commissioner and turn it directly over to the Commissioner to begin with an opening statement, and then we'll have some commissioners for us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui. Ça fait
much for having invited me to join you here today. It's been a year since I appeared before you last time, and I'm pleased to be here to answer questions about my office's portion of the main estimates. Generally speaking, in the past, our figures have not changed that much from year to year. However, you may notice that this year there is an increase to my permanent funding. I received this as part of the Supplementary Estimates B. And this has made a significant difference to the OIC's operations.
Nature of the additional funding granted to my office annually to address my backlog of complaints prevented me from permanently staffing a number of positions in my investigations team. And year after year, my predecessor and I were forced to request the funding anew. Permanent funding as at last allowed me to adopt longer-term approaches to human resources planning in order to ensure stability within my office and contend with the volume of complaints we are investigating. And we are capitalizing on this opportunity. I have used this funding to begin staffing processes which, once concluded, will result in a net gain of 26 full-time equivalents, 21 of whom will be working in the investigations and governance sector. Some of these new employees have already started on investigation at the OIC. Others will soon be joining us. I look forward to welcoming them to my team. Together, we will continue to work to uphold the right of access, which is a compromise due to the pressure we see within the system, a situation I have highlighted since even before the pandemic, but which I believe, with strong leadership and bold actions, including voluntary disclosure and proper information management, we can address. Avant de terminer, je tiens à vous assurer que le commissariat.
I would just end with the assurance to you all that my office's commitment to transparency and fair and efficient investigations endures. We could always do with more resources, but we have proven that we can be innovative with what we have and have demonstrated great adaptability, particularly in this time of great upheaval. So I'm very proud to say that since the very beginning of the pandemic, the OIC has been able to maintain its operations and indeed continue to innovate, even as we've dealt with the restrictions imposed upon us. So this bodes well for the future of the organization.
Your questions you have for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to begin with Monsieur Gourde for the first 6 minutes. Monsieur Gourde.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for having joined us once again. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Last time we spoke, I believe that we discussed some backlog in the processing of complaints. Has that changed much in the last year, especially given everything that's ongoing here?
Madame la Commissaire.
Ms. Commissioner, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't think I put myself on mute. Sorry, excusez-moi, monsieur.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Gourde. So what I wanted to say is, look, it's not better, but it's no worse either. When it comes to the OIC, I am pleased that we've been able to keep up the pace of work. We've received over 4,000 complaints this year, once again, and we've been able to process 4,600 in this year, even though we've all been working from home as of the month of March of last year. So my aim has been not to make things any worse, but to try to process as many files as possible, at least as many close out at least as many as new came in. Ideally, we would have done even better. But as you know, even though I have now received extra resources, institutions and other government bodies are not always that lucky. So we do face some restrictions when it comes to how quickly government organizations can respond to our requests for information. So that has had an effect on our ability to close out files. Nevertheless, I think we're doing well. So given your experience over the last year with telework and the pandemic, do you think that this is something that should be adopted for a certain percentage of your personnel into the future? Yes, definitely. What we have seen during the pandemic, which of course forced us to adopt new ways of work, was that we were quite lucky as of the month of March of last year. All our employees had access to computers at home. Everyone was connected to the internet. But we also learned to live with the new work style, with electronic signatures, using e-post. So many electronic documents are now shared between us. So all this made it easier for us to make the transition. We've learned that we are able to work from home. And many employees, based on surveys, have told us that they want to maintain that level of flexibility once we return to a normal work situation in the months to come. So what we hope to do is offer flexibility, a hybrid workforce, a certain number of days at home and a certain number of days in person at a shared office in order to encourage collegiality and face-to-face meetings, which of course we all miss. But work and our efficiency hasn't fluctuated. From your presentation, I've understood that you will be able to fill 21 new positions. Is that correct? Yes, we have received permanent additional funding as of last summer. This has allowed us to plan to hire 27 new employees, of whom 21 will be investigators. All right, so it looks like that should help you, at least. Yes, we certainly hope that will be good enough for the next years to come, 5 years to come. This is something that I was definitely aiming to get because we had temporary funding, and that's what we were working with as of a number of years. So we would hire consultants. We would have to let them go at the end of the year. We could never keep them because we couldn't offer them permanent positions. Now our aim is to keep them with us, to train them further, and to try to keep them within the OIC. Of course, it takes some time to train someone, and once you train them, they become an essential employee. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Gord. Commissioner, I'm wondering if you can just lift your mic away from your face a little bit. I think that it may reduce the static. Ms. Shanahan, thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Shanahan, we'll turn to you for the next round of questions.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chair. And I just wanted to say that sounds like that you've had some good news, Madame Maynard, but I'd like to have a little bit more details about how the additional funding is going to be allocated to help you complete your work. You were mentioning in your response to Monsieur Gould how the hybrid workplace has turned out to be a benefit, actually, and something to be considered. So is that going to alter some of your spending plans? Can you just shed some light on that for us?
Right now, we were going to be short in location for a new 27 new employees. So we were looking at having extra renting space. But because of the hybrid possibility and the flexibility that telework and working remotely has given us, we see that we won't need the additional renting space. So the money will be able to be spent on people and on innovation in terms of technology. We're definitely moving to a cloud environment at my office so that we can have easy access to all of our documents. We're scanning all the files so that we don't have any paper anymore and that people can actually work from home easily. It also is going to give us the flexibility of hiring people outside of the national capital region, which is great because we've always had difficulties recruiting in this field. So now we can have people in Toronto and Vancouver and London, Ontario. So this has been a great opportunity for my office in terms of hiring, retaining, and having all these people. And the $3 million that we received permanently, I was getting it every year for the last 5 years. But like I said earlier, it was always a temporary measure. Now we finally are able to invest long-term in our employees and in infrastructure so that we are going to be definitely getting finally some long-term gain.
Well, that is very interesting, and I'm just wondering because you mentioned, having less need to have employees in Ottawa itself, where we all know the rental market, the real estate market is heating up. As it is, though, in those other city centers, is it possible that you could have employees in smaller centers, in rural areas as well? I'm just throwing that out to you because I think we're blue skying a lot of ideas here.
Well, we're definitely looking at all the different options. Right now, we're not looking at getting more buildings or rental space because people are enjoying working from home. But I am told that as well that people are missing their colleagues and they're missing, the coffee talk and the lunches and be able just to look at their colleague beside them for help. Sometimes right now it's a little bit harder. You have to call people, you have to send them emails or chat, but we're looking at also like using Zoom or team meetings, video conferencing, all that technology to help everybody learn and be more efficient and be happy working from home or at the office, and having both, I think, will be a positive thing.
Excellent. Flexibility is the key, I think. So I just want to understand a little bit better. So you mentioned that you received additional funding. I just want to clarify the amount. Was it 4 million or 3 million?
3 million.
Pardon?
3 million.
3 million. And we know that budget 2021 proposes to provide additional funding over the next 5 years. I have the amount of 12.8 million, but maybe you'll correct me on that. But the idea there is that it is to further support further improvements to the online access to information and personal information request service, and to accelerate the proactive release of information to Canadians, and to support completion of the Access to Information Act review. So I'd like to have your comments on that, particularly the access. And I'm wondering, will there be increased online access, and will that benefit Canadians that are not necessarily in Ottawa, that they can easily access that service?
My understanding, this additional $12 million was given to Treasury Board, the department who is responsible to administer the Access to Information Act and the process and the system. So I think that money, we didn't receive any of that. Like, this is really for the government to better their system, to improve on their online request system. I don't know what the plan for Treasury Board is with respect to the money specifically, but I know they're putting together a new portal where Canadians will be able to ask for their access, do their access requests through that portal, but also receive the documents through that portal. So I think that's what they're looking into, making it easier for Canadians to get the information. But I'm sure, if you ask Minister Duclos and his team to tell you exactly what their plan is, they'll be happy to answer. We didn't really receive any of the additional information on that.
Well, certainly a new portal sounds interesting, because isn't that, and I'd like you to share if I have any time, Chair,
you are out of time, Ms. Shanahan.
There
I do
you go.
apologize, but you may get a chance to come back to that. Madame Goudreau, we'll turn to you now for the next 6 minutes.
Oui, bonjour, Madame la Commissaire.
Yes, good day, Ms. Commissioner. It's such a pleasure to see you here again, especially given that we can speak French with you. So, I think that this support that we have that you've been telling us about. It was very reassuring to hear in your opening statements that the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, the OPC, is receiving permanent funding and is able to hire 27 new employees, 21 investigators. So you tell us as well that you've been able to keep up with complaints, that you have been able to close out 4,060 of them. But I would like to hear about what is needed to ensure, practically speaking, that the backlog is whittled down, and what's really missing in your organization. You've received a new sum of money, and of course, funding is of such importance, and I know that you will have many other suggestions to share with us. Right now, at the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, we are working very hard on procedures to try to reduce the number of hours we put on solving any single complaint. We try to manage complaints and solve them as quickly as possible and with an informal fashion to make things move along quickly. If the government overall provides information on a voluntary basis to Canadians rather than waiting for Canadians to make access to information requests, you will see I will be tabling a special report regarding access information requests at Immigration Canada. This is the type of situation that shows us that it's possible that the Access to Information Act isn't necessarily the best platform for people to be turning to request information. I think there's a real chance for various departments to offer information on a voluntary basis rather than waiting for access to information requests. An access to information request should be a formal procedure that you engage at the end of a long process. Perhaps you're missing a few bits of information, you can't seem to get them, then you come to us. But otherwise, information should be available. It should be transparently up and available to people. And if we can get that underway everywhere, that will really help across the board, making for less complaints, fewer requests for access to information in the departments as well. I think that's very worthwhile. I myself have not made any access to information requests, so I'm quite curious about the process. I understand that there is this barrier to accessibility. Now you're speaking of voluntary sharing of information. So what are the requests that you see most often? Technically, given that all this is about spending taxpayers' money, I think the information should be more available. That seems to be the way forward. So what are the types of requests that you see more? Canadians are very curious. They're fully aware of their rights. So, of course, when they hear the news, for example, about the expenses incurred by the government to manage through the pandemic, vaccination contracts, vaccine access and product contracts, well, they're curious and they will try to access more information about the topic. What I tell ministers and deputy ministers whom I am lucky enough to meet, I say, look, you have information teams. They receive requests. They know the type of request that's recurrent. Sometimes when a topic has come to them 2 or 3 times, then perhaps you should be aware that this is the sort of information that you should proactively provide more information about, given that Canadians seem to be curious about it. Briefing notes as well. Yes, sometimes you see a title up on a web page, but there aren't any briefing notes up. So given that people are asking for these things, why not post them proactively? My last question, given that I don't think I have even a minute left, I'm hearing the word voluntarily, proactively. Perhaps given that I was working in an organization that was not-for-profit and we had to open all our books and very detailed and specific analyses of them were carried out. So now I'm saying, why voluntary? Is it a matter of legislation when it's the public government and taxpayers are paying for it? Shouldn't things be available as it is? I'm using the word voluntary given that in the law we see proactive sharing proactive communication. I don't think we need a law that requires that departments give information. I think the government can just go ahead on its own and provide information voluntarily without necessarily waiting for legislation to ensure that it does so. Interesting. Do I have time to respond, Mr. Chair?
Okay, but
All right, sorry. Do you have another recommendation that wouldn't take too long to share with us? I think a number of measures could be undertaken, but government management of information overall is delinquent. What do you mean by delinquent? That brings up a number of things to my mind. What do you mean? Well, it's lacking. When your request for information is made and the response is that there are 6,000 pages of documentation on that topic, sometimes I wonder, are there really 6,000? Are 5,000 of them just saying the same thing? Are they duplicates and there are only 1,000 pages that are really relevant? So there's a lot of need to have everyone better manage their information, especially that we're now working from home. We'd better well document our decision making and reduce duplication, reduce chains and email. Sometimes that turns up in requests. Perhaps there's only a little bit of what should be sent that's relevant. So if we can well manage our information so there isn't duplicate information all over the place, it'll make things easier for all of us. Thank you.
We will turn to Mr. Angus now for the next 6 minutes. Mr. Angus.
Well, thank you so much, Madame Maynard, for being with us today. I want to talk about the changing nature of work in the civil service with everyone working from home and working through the Zoom meetings. Are there protocols in place to actually record what happens in a Zoom meeting, or is it everyone just making whatever note they think matters to themselves? Like, how do we know what happens in that meeting is actually transcribed so that it could be available for access to information?
It's really up to the department, and there's a policy right now in the government. There's no legal obligation to document what's going on through meetings. I don't think there's anybody taping their videos, but there should be notes or minutes taking. It's the same as when we were working from at the office, when we had meetings with a group of people. It was a very normal thing for having, to have minutes at the end of your meeting of all the decisions and the discussion that was taken. I'm hoping that this is what the institutions are doing. We haven't had an investigation at this point on that subject, but there is no legal duty to document. It's really a policy within the government, and it's one of my recommendations in the next review of the legislation.
Okay. It's because whenever we have technological change, it does create loopholes. And I remember, I don't know, 8-10 years ago when people started to use pins. And I was told by political staffers, they only use pins because they can't be tracked. So never put anything in an email, only put it in a pin. Now we have Zoom calls where a lot of decisions are made. So are you formally recommending that we actually we should have a policy in place so that we can track what happened in meetings that were done on Zoom?
I'm recommending that, yes, there be a duty to document any decision, whether it's video or notes or minutes. The institutions and departments are making big decisions, bold decisions, and decisions that affect Canadians. So there should be a way to track those decisions, whether it's in writing or through different forms of methods of recording.
Well, thank you for that. Has the COVID crisis affected turnaround times in the department because people are not at work? Has that slowed down response times?
Definitely, we've seen definitely some delays caused by the pandemic. People don't have access to their office, especially institutions that are still working remotely and they cannot access paper files. Those have had some issues. We also see problems with the speed by which you can access your computers and ETHI. Normally, there's a lot of documents, even if it's electronically. So we have units that telling us they have to work at night and weekends when there's less people on the server. So that made things very difficult for a lot of institutions to respond to their access requests.
Thank you for that. As you know, I think 9 years into a fight with the Justice Department over the political decisions that were made. with the St. Anne's residential school battle, and we still haven't received those documents. It seems whenever you have a report every year that there are certain departments that tend to be outliers with less willingness to turn over information. Are you seeing a change? Do you deal with departments in particular that are troublesome to try and actually get them to comply with the law?
Yes, when we see that an institution is definitely behind and constantly there does not seem to be any improvement, I have the authority to initiate my own investigations. So I started just in the last 2 years. I've done one with the RCMP because they were having some problems. IRCC right now, immigration's going to be tabling my special report soon. I started one with the Library and Archive recently as well because they're definitely having some issues with especially with classified documents and the lack of a system to deal with those type of documents. So I do not hesitate to initiate systemic investigation when we see that we can maybe help the institution find out solutions that are outside the scope of one particular complaint.
Well, I thank you for that. I think it's really important that you are able to take those systemic investigations because I know our CMP has come up a number of times with red flags for non-compliance or very, very slow responses. So I'm glad to see that. I'm interested in the issue of the percentage of cases that are immigration cases for ETHI. And you had mentioned something earlier on, and I just wanted to drill deeper into that. Should we be setting up an alternate system so people can actually get information on their immigration files so that they're not using the access to information system and burden it down? Because the access to information system, I believe, should be about getting political information and for journalists and getting sort of a broader picture, the details of how government operates as opposed to individual files that people actually need help with. Is there a better system for them to get it?
I don't want to give you the scoop of my report that's going to be tabled in the next 2 weeks, but definitely what we're looking at is how to better serve those clients and whether the access to information is the proper system to give these people information that they need. Immigration has tons of really good solution and plans. I think it's just a question of the resources, like anybody else, and timing of those solutions. So you'll see in the report, we came up with a long list of things that they can do to better serve these clients, and that would be outside of the access requests.
So would that, just to end this on this, so would that be do we need a policy decision so that we can move it into another realm, or would your recommendations be enough?
I think the recommendation will be a good start, and I think the government, because I'm going to be tabling a special report, it's going to be up to you to decide whether you want to push it further. But immigration is definitely, Immigration Canada and the minister are definitely on board, and they were collaborating during the investigation, so they know what they need to do. It's just a matter of, again, resources and how long it's going to take.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to turn to Mr. Carey now for the next 5 minutes. Mr. Carey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Commissioner for your good work, particularly this year with the trying times that we're all facing. You mentioned something I found quite interesting in your opening, where you said because of the pandemic, there's been some positive effects where you may not need further real estate and office space because of the efficiencies of people being able to work at home. And I think as government constituents and the people of Canada, the better it is. And I was just wondering, are you able to track these efficiencies and give us an idea on how many more hours your employees are able to put towards complaints and resolution of issues?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order. As Vice President, I wish to tell you that unfortunately the interpretation has been interrupted. So perhaps Mr. Carey is not understandable to the interpreter. Perhaps we could simply test to see if the interpretation is able to process Mr. Carey.
Thank you very much. I have been having issues with the internet today. So, hear me? And Commissioner, can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, it was very choppy, so it's difficult to understand your questions. But I think you wanted to know how, if we have ways to find efficiencies or how we calculate the efficiency that were gained during the pandemic from working from
Yes.
home. It was not. It's not something we've done. Like specifically, what we've done is like we make sure that our files are still moving. We're not actually looking at particular task yet because we were still adjusting with the working from home. But like I said earlier, in 2 years ago, the maximum my office were able to do is about 2,000, 2,300, files per year. Last year, we did over 5,000 cases, and this year, 4,000 from working from home. I do believe we would have been able to do more if our institutions would have been able to respond to our requests. We were often stopped within our steps forward, because of the institution's inability to work from home or inability to respond to investigations because it didn't have the resources that we had at my office. So when we saw that, we moved towards other files that were a little more complex, or we assigned files. So I think in the next year, this is where we're going to see a huge improvement because I think now the departments are all set up and they have better usage of the working from home and access to their files. A lot of them have moved also to digital documents instead of having paper files. So that is going to be really helpful in our investigations in the next year.
You mentioned as well is that you're now able to recruit across Canada versus close to your office. Are there any government policies that are hindering your ability to recruit across the country?
No, it's usually we do recruit across Canada normally, but because of the type of work we were doing before, we were requiring people to move to Ottawa, so that because the work was all on paper files in our office, it was a lot. We didn't have this idea of you can do an investigation on access from home. That's why I was saying earlier, the pandemic has opened our eyes to all these opportunities that a lot of people, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, who before said, well, we can't do this work from home. But now we were forced to do it and it worked. So now we don't want to go back. We have to move forward and we have to see how well we adapted. And I think that we will be allowing people to work from outside of the national capital region because it's going to be easier. We can still meet them on Zoom. The only difficulties is the training. It's a lot harder to train people through Zoom, especially for our applications and specific tasks. We still have some limits also with respect to secret files, but generally, I think we're going to be able to allow a lot more flexibility in that field in the next future.
All right, thank you very much.
Merci.
Mr. Dong, we'll turn to you now for the next 5 minutes. I do apologize, members. I was having technical difficulty at the same time as Mr. Carey. So these are the challenges of working remotely for sure. I'm sure everybody within the civil service is experiencing similar experiences. Mr. Dong, we'll turn to you for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to thank the Commissioner for being here today. Commissioner, in your 2019-2020 report, you mentioned the target date to process or investigating refusal complaints is 270 days and 60% time, roughly 60% time you'd be able to, your office be able to meet that target. Just help me out to understand it a bit better. For the 270 days, how many days on average a person needs to wait to be assigned to a caseworker? On average?
On average, when it really depends because we do now have an early investigation resolution team. So every file that comes in is reviewed by somebody with a lot of experience, and we assign the files that we know we can resolve quickly right away. When the files is more complex, when it's a large file, we have files that are 20,000 pages, or of documents to review. Those are a little more difficult to assign quickly. So it can go from 1 week to 3 months. We do still have older files, top secret files and secret files that are a lot more difficult to manage. But we are trying to do it within 9 months. That's the goal.
Thank you. And I'm asking these questions in the context of my constituency casework. In your opinion, would it be abnormal, unusual to submit a complaint in November and still be waiting for it to be assigned in May? Is that usual, or is that normal or not?
I hope not. I believe that sometimes, we do have, we still have, like I said, 4,000 cases in our backlog. So one file out of 4,000 is sometimes, we can't assign them all to our investigation. We have now 60 investigators. We're going to be hiring 21 more. And I really hope that if you have a file like this, that you can contact our registry office and make sure that it's flagged to our team so that we can assign it to somebody as quickly as possible.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I just want to change gear a little bit. If someone wants to request information about themselves from the government, in this case is the employer, is it best to do that through Access to Information Act, or through the Privacy Act?
It really depends what the person is looking for. I've seen a lot of people doing through both, because you don't get the same information when you ask for your own personal information through the privacy. And if you ask for information, you're going to get probably more information than just your own little, personal information. Usually it comes with a lot more. It really depends what the person is looking for.
Can you give some examples, some typical requests? Either one of them.
Well, for example, in the grievance world where I used to work, if an employee would ask through privacy, they would receive just the information that's about that person particularly. But if you do an Access to Information Act request about the decision that was rendered and you're grieving, you may get the policy that goes around, the discussions that were made at the meetings, more than just the information about yourself.
I see. And okay. And example for Privacy Act?
Well, that's exactly the one. Like if the person asks for privacy, I believe they're going to get only the information about themselves.
Great. And you mentioned the additional resource would be able to help your office to maybe clear up the backlog a little bit. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Well, we're hiring 21 new investigators, and we are starting we've started a development program within the office. So we're hoping that these people will stay more than 2 years. Often we train them. They get all the information, all the knowledge, and then the institutions who are doing ATIP are looking for analysts, so they may come and get them. So now we have a program where the people are starting at the junior level, but they can move up 2 levels within 6 years within my office. With 21 new investigators, we can count about 40 cases per investigators per year. So we're hoping that we're going to get a big chunk of our inventory through to the training of these new people.
And the 270-day target will probably be improved with these.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to Madame Goudreau now for the next 2.5 minutes. Madame Goudreau.
Alors, je vais parler vite parce que...
Very well. I'll be speaking quickly, given that... I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I mispronounced your name earlier, Ms. Ménard. So you'll see, my questions are very specific. You've certainly heard tell, and I saw it in the news on the 11th of May last, that we learned that the RCMP, journalist Ms. Marquis in La Presse, said that there were requests for information in French that took longer to settle in French than in English. So my question is simple. Are you aware of that announcement made on the 11th of May regarding the RCMP's need to provide responses as quickly in French as in English? And are you aware of whether this problem exists elsewhere in other institutions? I am a speaker for Vive Ensemble, and my colleague, Mr. Fergus, could certainly reassure you that I really care about equality. So it's a matter of equality to me. Yes, I did read that article, Ms. Gold, but I did not see any complaints come to us in that regard. I wouldn't be surprised to see that situation reproduced elsewhere. The ability to find bilingual people, people who speak both French and English, is not always easy here in the federal government. So we certainly need to ensure that we have positions that are staffed with people able to work in both languages. Access to information requests. Very difficult to find people who want to work in this area. It's a very difficult area. Of course, claimants are impatient. They want to get the information. And then on the other hand, you have a department that has got something else that's more important to them to do, don't have the time to respond, or sometimes don't want to respond. Services in both languages at the government level have always been, I would say, precarious in some regards. Well, I would like to hear the bottom line. When I hear a journalist saying that the RCMP is saying that it's because they haven't got the personnel to handle this, given that we're concerned to ensure that both languages are served, and that's certainly a legislative matter, I would appreciate our being able to study this matter from this angle. We have, golden level of interpretation here in Parliament itself, and we're able to work in both languages, and I think that's a necessity. Thank you so much for being with us, Ms. Ménard.
We're going to turn to Mr. Angus now for the next 2.5 minutes. Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Madame Maynard. We received a letter this week from one of the MPs, a Conservative MP, Mr. Kimmich, who said that he had 18 outstanding requests ignored from Global Affairs, Public Services and Procurement, Innovation Canada, Finance, on access to information. He said they disregarded his requests, they refused to acknowledge requests, and they declined to provide documents. So I'm just trying to get a sense, is that a pattern that you're seeing? Are you dealing with these kind of complaints more and more, or is this a one-off?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the government, because of the lack of resources and some complaints with delays, and I'm not seeing as much the not responding at all. I think institutions have an obligation to either respond within 30 days. They do have an obligation to respond within 30 days. And if they don't respond within 30 days, they have an obligation to tell you why and what the extension they're taking. If they're not responding, if it's a silence, you have a right to complain to my office within 60 days of the time that you know that you haven't received a response.
Okay, I asked that because I am concerned. I know I've had Liberal governments and Conservative governments, and governments never want to actually have to respond to requests because it means they sometimes have to reveal stuff that gets them into trouble. But for opposition, access to information is our lifeblood. It's how we survive. It's the same as journalism. It's a fundamental of democracy. So even though we are in a pandemic, and even though we know that everybody's been stressed out, the need to actually make sure that we're dealing with compliance of the law is very important. And I just want to get a sense that you're focused on making sure that people are complying and are not using COVID as a means to ignore responding to access to information requests that may be politically sensitive.
Clearly, we've actually issued a report on an institution, Patrimoine Canada, Heritage, who had stopped completely their activities last summer after the pandemic. And we did our investigation right away. Luckily, it resulted in them reopening. We are keeping an eye on all the institutions to make sure that they are respecting their obligation. I've done a lot of statements. I've wrote to Minister Duclos to remind him of his obligation also as the administrator of the Act. So I think in a pandemic, even more so, it's important that Canadians receive the information that they're asking for, because we're all, concerned with what's going on. So we need to make sure that we know where the money is being spent, where decisions are being made, and the act is not something that you can ignore during the pandemic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to turn to Monsieur Gourde for the next 5 minutes. Monsieur Gourde.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame la Commissaire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Commissioner, do you have a discretionary right to accept a complaint or to reject it, or is there always an investigation when one is received? Since 2019, I do have the power to refuse to investigate. I always also have the power to put an end to an investigation if I think that it is vexatious or unreasonable or made in bad faith. I have not had to do so far. It's very difficult to decide based on face value. When you receive a request, a complaint, request for information, you have to look into it a little bit, try to see what the person is really looking for. Is it really the same thing as what they've already received? So you have to do some work, but I do have the authority to do so. You have told us that the Minister of Immigration, the Department of Immigration, receives a good deal of complaints. In our county, we have to work a lot with them, given that people have a lot of trouble digging their file out of the governmental machine. I've never seen, or rarely seen, a case in my area where things just get solved by themselves. And it looks like there's really a problem at Immigration Canada. Have you been able to put your finger on it? Is there a lack of training about how to help people manage their files or get information about the files, or is it bad faith? I'd rather not comment on that, but what I can say, that when it comes to access to information, we have definitely found some shortcomings, even with regard to the information that is offered to persons who make requests for information about the status and refugee status. So we're trying to find ways to ensure that these people are able to access their personal information more easily without having to go through the access to information request system. I strongly encourage you to continue, because it's very unfortunate. I have seen cases of people who've had to wait 6 months, a year, to get a piece of paper that got lost somewhere and they had to resend it, or it took evidence, something signed by the department about something and they couldn't get it. And it's very unfortunate. Of course, it's already a long process making a request, and it's just really too bad that it takes twice as long, 3 times as long. Very unfortunate situations. Do you have anything else to add about any gaps that you have seen where great improvements could be made, great strides could be made? When it comes to the government overall, we really do need people who support the transparency programs of leaders, of ministers, who are able to take risks, able to put that information out there on a voluntary basis. Better information, that would help a good deal. I think you're quite right. Transparency always wins out. The truth always wins out, and it's always easier to sidle up to transparency and the truth when you've got a lot of information out there. When you have access to all the information, it's much easier to proceed together. Thank you so much for your work, and please continue.
Thank you, Monsieur Gourde. We're going to turn now to Ms. Latanzio for the next 5 minutes. Ms. Latanzio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Ménard, for being with us today. Through Bill C-58 passed during the previous Parliament, the Information Commissioner was given unprecedented new responsibilities and authorities, including the power to order institutions to release records at the end of an investigation when the Commissioner found that the complaint was well-founded. The Commissioner now is also able to issue such orders on new complaints that cannot satisfactorily be resolved through informal resolution mechanisms that you also have in place. Can you tell us how this has been, how this is helpful to you, and how it has improved your work, and maybe even perhaps dealt with the issue of delays in rendering decisions?
I have to say that I have only intended to order the release or the treatment of a file twice so far, because I've never had to go that far. People, I think, know that we have the authority. Just knowing that we can do it, it's a big advantage, you know, in our dealing with the institution. The other authority that we have now that is a tremendous advantage and had a huge positive impact is the publication of our reports. When we can publish a report which explain the positions of the institution, our position, it really helps later on at guiding, you know, other requesters and institutions in understanding the Act, understanding its application, seeing how, you know, files that are similar. So at this point, I actually prefer the authority to publish than I haven't had, like I say, I use the ordering power. I will use it when I have to, but I prefer to resolve things informally. And if people are satisfied and you get the result that you want faster that way, by ordering an institution, then the institution can contest it in court. So there's another step, and it could, you know, lead to more delays. So I prefer if we can do it informally. But I welcome, you know, I invite you to go on my site and see some of those reports that we publish, and I think we're going to see more and more of those in the next year.
Thank you. And with regards to the nature of the complaints, if I can call them as such, if you were to give us an idea, not so much in terms of percentages, because obviously it's not, I'm not looking into the specificities, but in terms of giving us an idea of the first, you know, major complaint would be in this kind of category, the second, or just to sort of give us an idea of what you see on a yearly basis to the committee, the main complaints or what comes across your office on a yearly basis.
Bar one, the main complaint is delays, extensions, unreasonable extensions taken by institutions to respond to access requests, or people not receiving at all any response, like we were talking about earlier. We have last year 3,000 cases, I think, of complaints for extensions or delays. And normally, again, we are able to get the institution to respond and to resolve these cases, but we need to look at why they're taking so long. And one of the key reason is consultations between departments, because if you're consulting with another department, they don't have a timeline to respond to you. So often institutions are just waiting there to get the response from another institution. And that's a huge problem within our Act. And that's something that I've addressed in my submission to change within the next legislative review to add some timelines.
Yeah, this is what I was going to suggest. Have you thought of putting some sort of a timetable and prescriptive delays to be able to help you ease along in your investigations? Okay, with regards to the recommendations, I went on the website and I looked at some of the recommendations and amendments proposed, and I wanted to hear you more on making the reporting requirements, and I'm citing the third one, the same for all in-house lobbyist registration, because I understand that there was a difference between corporations and organizations, and I wanted to hear you a little bit on that, into how that amendment you see improving the process.
I think you're referring to the recommendations from Commissioner Belanger.
Yeah.
The lobbyist commissioner is going to be coming to you after me. Yeah.
Okay, right. Sorry about
That's
that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. When I'm going to go back in terms of the publishing of the results of the investigations, when can we expect the next publication of all your investigations that you've carried on?
So one of the thing in the Act is when I issue a final report, I have to wait 35 days before I can publish a report. It gives the, I guess, the institution sometimes to digest the report before it's public and it's published on my website. That's something I also recommended that we remove in the next review of the legislation, because I think Canadians, the the public and the institutions should be able to see our recommendations or orders right away. We shouldn't be having to wait. But right now, at least, I have to wait. But it's every 35 days after a report is issued, we publish the reports in both French and English.
Okay. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Latanzio. Commissioner Maynard, thanks so much for your testimony this afternoon. I thank you for making yourself available, and I look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Thanks so much for answering the questions that we had. Colleagues, I will suspend the meeting now to allow for Madame Belanger to be added, as well as other members to be exchanged. And we'll call this meeting back to order at 2 o'clock, so right on the 2 o'clock mark. Again, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
back to order. We do have Madame Belanger who is joining us. Thanks so much, Commissioner, for joining us for the second hour of this meeting. We'll turn it over to you for a opening statement, and then we'll certainly have some questions for you as we review these estimates. Madame Belanger, we'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I believe this is the first time we meet. Committee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on the main estimates. I am pleased to speak to you about my office, its accomplishments over the past fiscal year, and our plans for this one. I want to start by saying that I am so very proud of the way my staff responded with innovative thinking, adaptability, and resolve over the past 14 months. Part of this success is due to thoughtful planning during our move in 2019, when we ensured we had the tools and equipment we needed to be a modern and mobile workforce. That decision paid huge dividends when we suddenly shifted to telework in March 2020. As a result, my office was able to face its busiest year and deliver on the 3 areas of my mandate: maintaining the registry of lobbyists, ensuring compliance with the Lobbying Act and the Lobbyist Code of Conduct, fostering awareness of Canada's lobbying regime among all stakeholders. Je vais tout d'abord vous parler du registre des lobbyistes.
I'll begin with the Registry of Lobbyists. When individuals, corporations, or organizations lobby the federal government, they must file a public registration that contains specific details about their lobbying activity. They must also report certain oral and arranged communications with high-level decision makers in monthly communication reports. This past year brought records in several areas. We saw the highest monthly average of active lobbyists and a record of 6,435 of them in March 2021. There were 2,457 new registrations. This reflects an increase of 41% over the previous year. With respect to monthly communication reports, we also saw record numbers, with a total of 28,919 for the year. Our activities to ensure compliance have also increased. 28 preliminary assessments were initiated, almost twice the number of the previous year. During the last fiscal year, 6 preliminary assessments proceeded to the investigation stage and 12 were closed. I suspended 3 investigations after referring them to the RCMP. I also recently tabled 1 investigation report in Parliament. My office had 24 preliminary assessments and 4 investigations ongoing at the end of the last fiscal year.
Shifted to a completely virtual model. The team averaged more than 1 presentation per week, reaching more than 900 stakeholders. I also participated in several virtual events at the international level to speak about the Canadian experience with lobbying regulation. As you know, many other jurisdictions view the Lobbying Act and the Lobbyist Code of Conduct as models that they aspire to emulate. While Canada's legislation delivers on the goal of fostering transparent and ethical lobbying, there's always room for improvement. And therefore, upon your request, I submitted a report called Improving the Lobbying Act, My Preliminary Recommendations, to this committee in February. It outlines 11 areas where I believe that improvements to the legislation would enhance transparency, fairness, clarity, and efficiency. I look forward to discussing these recommendations with you. Last November, we also launched a public consultation to seek input from stakeholders on potential changes to the Lobbyist Code of Conduct. The office is currently revising the code for the purposes of further consultation. I expect that I will be able to refer to you, the committee, a new and updated Lobbyist Code of Conduct and publish the final version in the Canada Gazette before the end of this fiscal year. Other key initiatives for this year include enhancing the usability of the Registry of Lobbyists and make it easier to enter and find information. We will also explore ways to improve efficiencies in compliance work and expand awareness and understanding of the Act and the Code by using stakeholder feedback to help us focus outreach activities. Tout ce travail est effectué par une très petite équipe de 20.
All of this work is being performed by a very small team of 28 employees. It's important to recognize that more often than not, we're asking them to go well beyond what is required of their position. My total budget is approximately $4.18 million, excluding employment benefit payments. More than 3/4 of my total allocation goes to salaries and benefits, leaving me with an operating budget of about $1 million. About half of that amount is spent to obtain corporate services such as human resources from other government institutions. The office's budget has not changed substantially since 2008. That is why I am pleased to say that we have received a positive answer to our request for additional funding. Budget 2021 allocated a total increase of $4 million over the next 5 years to help ensure that the Registry of Lobbyists and the office's IM and IT systems remain modern, reliable, secure, and accessible. The increase will mainly serve to hire 5 additional IM/IT employees. I would like to conclude my remarks by thanking each and every member of the office. I want to recognize their dedication, professionalism, and excellence in delivering on our mandate despite the challenges of the last year. Mr. Chair and committee members, that concludes my remarks. Thank you, and I will welcome your questions.
Commissioner, we'll turn to Mr. Carey for the first round of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Commissioner for being here today. And I was wondering if you could comment, it's section 14.11 of the Lobbying Act recommends a comprehensive review every 5 years. And the last one was done in 2012, which means the review should have been done in 2017. And now it's almost 4 years later, and the review has not taken place. I was wondering if you could comment if you think that a review at this time is urgent.
Sorry, I didn't hear the end of the question. Urgent? Is that what the question? I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Yeah,
urgent?
yes,
okay.
Yes, that was the.
Well,
yes,
okay.
Urgent.
You know, when I appeared on my nomination back in December or November of 2017, I was asked to be prepared for recommendations on the review of the Act in the spring of 2018. It's been 3 years since then. So I think it is very important that we seriously look at reviewing the Lobbying Act. If we wait till 2022, it'll have been 10 years since it was looked at. So I think it is time. Some of the recommendations that I'm making are the same that was made in 2012, and so I think it would be important to start looking at this work. I fully understand that there are a lot of more pressing issues that have occurred in the last year, but I think with the will of Parliament, I think it would be wonderful, and I'm here to assist in that review.
Are there any recommendations that you could discuss with us or you could share with us that you think of a more urgent nature? Do you think if we had a review take place, would it allow you to allocate your resources, for example, in a
to allocate resources to the implementation of the recommendations, you mean? Or to allocate resources to do the review?
Review. Yeah.
To do the review. Well, sorry. I think you know, we are ready to be able to work with the committee on the review of the Lobbying Act. I have already done 11. I've proposed 11 recommendations. These are preliminary. I want to hear what people have to say. I am listening and I'm looking at the reactions. There might be more. We might tweak the ones that we have submitted to you based on your feedback, based on your questions. These are not set in stone. Do I have some that I prefer to the others? You know, this is a package deal. One affects the other, another one affects the other. And if we're serious about ensuring further transparency and clarity and efficiency, I think we need to look at them together.
Have you had a chance to evaluate any efficiencies that your office may have been able to take advantage of during the pandemic? And I'm assuming having employees work from home?
You know, we have a team of 28 with a very big mandate. So we're already extremely efficient. Working from home has probably helped us to be more digitalized, you know, electronic signature, paperless, all very good things. We were extremely productive, but at the end of the day, the productivity in the circumstance of working from home has a cost. People are tired. And so efficiencies, I'm not certain we've gained that many, but certain, you know, you start a meeting, some Wi-Fi takes off, somebody leaves because the VPN broke down, then you need to repeat everything that was said to the other person when they can join again. It's hard. It takes time. It was a difficult year, but people are resilient, and I am so proud of them. But we were as productive, but efficiencies, I'm not so sure.
How am I doing for time, Mr. Chair?
You have just under a minute and a half.
All right, thank you very much. Out of curiosity, I was wondering, what is the biggest complaint you hear about the Lobbyist Act from actual lobbyists?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I hear complaints from lobbyists. They abide by it. There's 6,000 people that are registered. I've heard a couple of rumblings since I've tabled my recommendations, but I usually don't hear quite the reverse. In fact, I often get a nice email about our client services team and how people are really here to help them and making sure that they can, you know, register and fill out. Sometimes we get a lot of questions about the technicalities of how to enter information, but we're there to help them. And it is a pretty, very, very good tool, and people seem to be able to use it pretty easily as well. So I can't say that I really get complaints.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Mr.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. We did get through, but your connection is definitely a challenge there. We'll hope that the remaining questions can be done without the interference of that. Mr. Fergus, we'll turn to you for the next round of questions.
Oh, mais merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I hope that my connection will hold up and that my questions will be easy to understand. Ms. Commissioner, welcome. It's a pleasure to see you here again, or to see you again, even though it may be your first time here before us. The last time that we had a chance to meet you in a parliamentary setting, you had been tabled a ministerial plan, a departmental plan, and we're asking to have your budget improved, more funding. And in the last budget, your office has received $4 million over and above the prior amount allotted to you, so that you are in a position to improve your office's abilities to carry out your tasks and certainly your IT systems. Could you tell us a little bit about what your plan is, what you expect to do with this funding? And what will you be accomplishing with this funding? What purpose will it serve? Thank you. I can certainly tell you that the entire team is so pleased to see that we have received funding in the budget. $620 million this year, and then 780,000. It's simply to add 5 employees, especially in our IT services. We have 3 specialists who are trying to provide everything we need. We do rely a good deal on consultants, and they're really terrific, but at some point we certainly do need more in-house staff to work on the register. There are so many things we can do with the registry of lobbyists to make it more user-friendly, for example. So the funds will help us hire 5 employees. We also will have funding to update our tools. Our actual hardware costs more now. So we've asked for $158,000 more a year to cover that. And we've also asked for $175,000 this year to help us evaluate our ability to move into the cloud. That's something that the government would like to see us doing, but I had no extra funding to go ahead and evaluate that possibility. We hope we can do that this year, go ahead with that, and see whether we could move into the cloud. So Canadians will be served by our improving the registry of lobbyists and by our improving our internal systems. We have 3 or 4 systems now being used that they don't really crosstalk, so that we hope that these employees will be able to improve the communications between our current systems and simplify them. Madam Commissioner, you also mentioned some of the difficulties that your team faced, as all civil servants and all Canadians have as well over the last year, in turning around their style and their working style. We're all working from home. And this change, was undertaken so quickly. What do you expect in future? What do you think will be happening when people start returning to physical offices, at least from time to time? Do you have any plans to continue with a hybrid workforce? Thank you. That's a great question. I can tell you that I really look forward to seeing my staff in person. You've no idea how happy that's going to make me. But yes, indeed, people have found ways to adapt to the situation, to working from home, despite all the challenges it represents, especially for those who are raising children. You start your day pretty early in the morning and you really don't know when it's going to end. I have said that, yes, we've been very productive, but that's because we have worked long hours to ensure that we get through everything. I myself had already drawn up a plan for last September, but I've got this plan. It's going to be updated to take into account the recent changes. And I will be working with our health officers to ensure that we respect what's acceptable, not acceptable. We'll continue with telework, of course, but I'll also ask people to turn up in person from time to time, merely for mental health purposes. We really do believe that it's a good idea for people to see each other every once in a while, and it's going to help everyone. Dress up, come down to the office, and really talk, speak face-to-face, discuss our files, help us move forward. Of course, we'll continue working from home, but I also expect us to be able to return to office space. I think that will be a very important step. One final quick question.
Your time is up. A short question, if you do have one.
C'est très court, Monsieur le Président. Merci de votre.
It will be very short, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your support. Have you found that the tools you are offering future lobbyists, persons wishing to join the lobbying register, have taken advantages of any changes you've made in the last year. Yes, indeed. Over the last year, we've been able to make it a little easier to access the registry of lobbyists. In the past, people had to use computers. They still do, but we have improved the process. And we're certainly ready to hear from those who have suggestions to make, and we've made good use of suggestions that have been made so far. Thank you, Ms. Commissioner.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. We'll turn to Madame Goudreau. Sorry, pardon me, Madame Goudreau.
C'est correct, Madame Gaudreau. Oui, c'est
That's fine. Ms. Goudreau, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And hello, Ms. Bélanger. It's such a pleasure to speak to you for a few minutes here. This is the second time we're meeting. Once again, I can say that it certainly takes more than one act before you can say you're experienced in these matters. But here's my question. It's about operating procedures. Let me give you an example. As a parliamentarian, we meet people who sometimes are official lobbyists. They are on the registry of lobbyists. And I'm thinking of this because I haven't read your 11 recommendations. I do know that in the review of the Act, there are a number of things that we should see to avoid having the same problems that we've seen in the last year. So what's the obligation of parliamentarians to ensure that they know who they are speaking to? What are the right steps for us to take? Technically speaking, I know that we do have access to the registry of lobbyists, and we can see who we're dealing with, and we need to ensure we know who we have worked with or heard. But I'd like to hear you on this, given that I don't have that much experience. Thank you so much for the question. Currently, the Lobbying Act does not require of MPs or of public office holders the taking of notes or anything specific about how they need to inform themselves. But I do recommend that you go to the registry online. You'll see a lot of information about the people you've met before, about who you may meet in the future. This can give you a good deal of information, and you will be well equipped to meet with them. You do not have any obligation. However, you are, of course, the first witnesses whom I will come to if I need to investigate. If I need to communicate with you to see whether a lobbyist or someone who should be on the registry is or isn't on the registry, well, it's very helpful for you to have information to share with me because you have taken notes. And you must provide me with answers when you receive a form. It's a specific form that asks you to confirm that you did have a meeting with any specific lobbyist who has made note of that meeting in their registry. So you need notes of that. Besides that, you have no other specific obligation other than that of speaking to me when I come to speak to you. But based on your level of expertise, if I'm not vigilant, or I or any other parliamentarian, true enough, it might be that we are inviting a problem. We're leaving ourselves open to a problem. And then, of course, there's the conflict of interest legislation. It might be a slippery slope. It's easy to just put your foot in the wrong place, no? Look, I regulate lobbyists. And, of course, that covers communications they have with you. Should there be an obligation? A statutory obligation that you take notes? I'm not sure. But if you haven't taken notes, can I hold that against you? Are you obliged to keep notes? I think we would have to think through the eventual consequences of putting something like that in a statutory form in legislation. Let's say you're meeting someone, they're not in the registry, perhaps they should be in the registry, you know they're not in the registry. What does that mean? I'm thinking about these questions, and I will eventually like to hear what you have to say about it as well. Well, my opinion is that ideally our aim is to be transparent, and I see that even attempting to be transparent, there are a number of gray zones. It seems that it could be easy to make a mistake. Like I tell my children, it's very helpful to have rules, because without rules, you could make a mistake It's important as well to ensure that Canadians trust us, believe that and feel and know that their parliament is transparent and fair and neutral. I'm certainly looking forward to reading your 11 recommendations, and I hope there might be a 12th recommendation touching on possible reforms that would help us stay out of the gray zones. You know, it's really taxpayer money, so we certainly need to guarantee transparency of process to the taxpayers. Well, indeed, there are many public office holders who do come to speak to me because they are concerned, they've met someone, and so on. That said, there is no obligation that they take notes or let me know that they have a problem, but it's very helpful when they do come and speak to me. That's very reassuring. I'm very glad to have heard that from you. Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair?
You're nearly out of time.
Je vais avoir une question qui tue.
All right, I will have another question later on the second round.
We're going to turn to Mr. Angus now. Mr. Angus for the next 6 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for coming. It's a pleasure to have you back, and I share your sense of urgency that we really need to get the government to direct our committee to look at the Lobbying Act, because normally the questions I bother you with are these questions of loopholes, questions of gaps in the Act that we need clarification. For example, when Mr. Kielburger spoke to our committee, he said that it was legally impossible for him to register to lobby, because we'd asked the question about the multiple meetings the Kielburger Group had with government over millions of dollars in contracts. He said as a co-founder volunteer, it was legally impossible. He couldn't register. You sent me a letter on March 19th of this year confirming that there's nothing in the Act to preclude someone like Mr. Kielburger as an individual from registering, and could do so for the, quote, purposes of transparency. So would that be a correct interpretation of the Act?
The Act right now requires, it's a requirement for someone that's paid, right, to either as a consultant or in-house lobbyist to lobby, to register. However, if someone chooses to put their name in the transparent to say that they've lobbied, whether they're paid or not, that is that there's nothing in the registry that would stop someone from being able to do that if they wish to do so.
Okay, so there was nothing to legally stop him. It was certainly possible. So the question of paying is interesting, because one of the arguments that the Kielburger brothers used was that they were just volunteers. They didn't get paid. Mm-hmm. So therefore, they were like any other volunteer who knocks on an MP's door. But we just read the conflict of interest, the commissioner's report, and he states that any decision made by Mr. Morneau that could further the private interests of WE would have been made improperly, since it would have also furthered the interests of its co-founder, Mr. Kielburger. He goes on to state that WE was the lone administrator of the CSSG and would have acquired a significant financial interest in its role. The Kielburger's involvement in WE's day-to-day operations is so prevalent that the organization's interests are also those of its co-founders. Would you say from that interpretation of the conflict of interest commissioner's findings that they would have been in a better position to actually have registered to lobby because of their direct financial interest?
I never know if you can hear me when I start talking.
Yeah.
I think it would be inappropriate for me to try and interpret that statement and try to transfer it to the Lobbying Act. The Lobbying Act says that anyone who is paid as a consultant or is an employee must register.
Okay.
That's what the Act says.
Okay, so someone who had a direct financial interest may not need to register then.
I would have to review those particular circumstances to decide if there was a payment.
Okay, because one of the other things that they told our committee was that they met government so rarely that there was no need to actually register to lobby, even though they had a director of government relations and they were hiring a manager of government relations. But yesterday, according to the commissioner's report, he said that they were Craig Kielburger's team was so familiar in the finance minister's office that they opened their conversation with staff with the term, "Hey girl." That suggests someone who really was comfortable on the insides of power. Wouldn't it be better that these kind of insider access are registered to lobby? Because we would have no idea about these meetings if they aren't registered.
To answer your question, and I really want to stay away from talking about any specifics of the file because it would be
totally understand.
would be inappropriate for me to do so. But one of my recommendations is exactly that. The significant part of duties, to me, if you have one conversation and that conversation is a registrable activity, it's lobbying, you should have to register, period. Right. The calculation of how many times someone talked to somebody and how long did they talk to, and did it mean that it was a significant part of their duty? It is an exercise that organizations, corporations have to do, and it's an exercise that I have then to do to be able to figure that out. And it's just unnecessary. The burden of registering is not that high. It's not that difficult to register.
It's not that difficult. Well, I was interested because you're saying how most lobbyists thank you. It's a pretty straightforward thing. And for me, it's about a level playing field of making sure that everyone has the same level of access and not unfair access. Because, and I know you don't want to talk about individual cases, but in November and December 2017, the finance minister held his budget consultations in the offices of WE, and they were promoted by WE. And Mr. Morneau called on the parliamentary secretary to attend a meeting, and she asked why she needed to be there. And this is all according to the findings. And they said that Craig, has been very good to us. That's the finance minister's office. So we want to keep him happy. I found that to be extraordinary. That seems to me that actually the finance minister's office was setting up meetings to keep Craig Kielburger happy, yet none of this was registered. Wouldn't that put other groups who are trying to lobby fairly and filling out all the forms, doesn't that put them at an extreme disadvantage?
Well, anyone who lobbies, in my view, should be registered. And once they're registered, they are subject to a code of conduct. And the code of conduct specifically says that lobbyists should not be putting individuals with whom they have a relationship in a position where it creates a sense of obligation. So these are rules that apply to lobbyists when they are registered, and they should be abiding by the code of conduct. And I have to say, I don't get that many complaints with respect to the code of conduct.
But if you ignored the rules and then were able to develop that relationship where you could call minister staff, hey girl, and have meetings, and they'd say they want to keep Craig happy, you're completely operating under the radar, and nobody outside the minister's office or that organization would know. That's, I guess, my concern is how do we make sure that we have transparency and accountability across the board for everyone who plays in the public realm?
My answer to that would be we change the act. We need to amend that lobbying act.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to turn to Monsieur Gourde. Monsieur Gourde for the next 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the Commissioner for being with us. My question is about the record number of registrations on the Registry of Lobbyists this year, given that it's been a year of pandemic and it's been difficult to meet civil servants or public office holders. So what do you think the explanation of this is? I am actually drawing up our annual report. Over the past year, the lobbyists with whom we have spoken have said that you have all made yourselves very accessible. I can tell you that what we hear is that lobbyists have been able to change their way of working, and they've been able to set up many Zoom meetings. And it's such meetings, given that they are oral meetings and that they are planned in advance, have necessarily been entered into the Registry of Lobbyists accounts of their activities. And indeed, they have found that politicians have been very accessible to them, and they've been able to use the tools now available to meet them. That's one of the things I can share with you. Many groups, of course, have had to work with you to see what programs would be needed during the pandemic, and people have wanted to hear them, to see what their priorities were and how they could be reassured, and how indeed we would ensure that Canadians be able to survive this very difficult year. Do you have a list of departments that are more popular than others, at least with regard to lobbying requests? Yes, I do have a list. I would say that first up we have the House of Commons. So MPs are those who are most often visited by lobbyists. And then we have the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. It comes second, and Finance comes in third. That's the list that we keep, and it is accessible. If you examine the Registry of Lobbyists, that information is there, but it will also be in my annual report. Do you have any recommendations that you would like to share with us? Any special issues or items, elements, problems that we should be paying attention to? I would certainly like you to read my 11 recommendations. That would be wonderful, especially if someday we could work together on them. I continue recommending that you take good notes when you meet lobbyists. But I would also think it would be helpful if you would inform lobbyists, perhaps that they aren't registered. Talk to them, tell them to call us. It's much better to prevent problems than to try to solve them. No one wants to wind up being investigated by the RCMP, so suggest to them that they get in touch with us if they're not registered. People who speak to us, must they tell us that they are registered? Sometimes people come to us, they're a member of an association, and they might speak to us for 5 or 10 minutes a year, and then we might find later that they are on the registry of lobbyists and they didn't even tell us they were. Do they have to tell us? Well, according to the lobbyists' code of conduct, they are obliged to tell you who they represent, whom they are meeting you for. If they're a consultant, they're obliged to tell you who their client is. But if they are the member of an association, I recommend that you make sure that your team gives you any information that would be in the registry of lobbyists and tell them that they should register if they aren't. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gourd. We're going to turn to Mr. Sobera now for the next 5 minutes. Mr. Sobera.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, Ms. Belanger, Commissioner. I took a look through the 2021-22 departmental plan. I had a chance to read it over in the last little bit. And if I can just go from that angle, because I think my colleagues have asked other questions and I don't want to repeat. On literally page 1 on the key highlights, and I'd like you to just expand, if you may, enhancing the registry of lobbyists to make it easier to use, from entering data to finding information, also making it fostering compliance work that fosters transparency and more engaging for Canadians. So on those type of high level, can you expand on that, what that actually means or what the intent is, please?
Certainly. So the registry is an automated system in which wasn't really accessible through a mobile. So now we've done that. When our registrants go into the system, they have to enter the data all the time. One of the things we're looking for is maybe having a system by which they could use the data that they've entered before rather than having to re-enter information. We are looking at possibly doing drop-down boxes of the names of designated public office holders, because right now when they start typing a name will pop up, they'll pick it, but then if someone misspelled or something, there could be an error in the system and how a name is done. We're looking at ways for individuals to be able to issue reports a little bit easier. A lot of journalists use our registry, and so trying to look for ways to enhance how they can report on the registry. So there's a lot of little things that we can do to make it even more user-friendly, and that's what we're looking at. If you want me to address enhancing awareness,
please.
Yes. in the last year, we have updated our registry, and we're always looking for ways to improve our actual tools and the documents that we provide. We have just set up a sort of a little survey to ask people how do they find our material and is it useful and what else can we do. We never say no to any invitation. I'm doing one at 6 o'clock in the morning at some point next week, I think. We never say no. We have done an average of one per week, but because we're so small, we're trying to find ways to be more proactive, but it is so difficult because we're much more transactional and reactionary than being able to be out there. So one of the priorities in this year will be to come up with a communication plan that possibly will reach out to even more Canadians so that they know, what the Lobbying Act and what we do, and that they can use the tool of the registry to see who's talking to their members of parliament. So there's always work to be done, but we have to take it one step at a time because we're so small. We do what we can. We do what we can.
No. I want to thank you for what you do, and the 24 planned FTEs for the next 3 year from 21, 22 to 23, 24. So I can understand, and I'm glad to hear the increase. I would say digitization, at least for the information that you would collect on a basis. Because this is my second turn as a member of parliament. Even in my first session, I sat on the finance committee. I was visited by, I think it was the third most visited MP at the time. I really enjoy meeting with stakeholders because I get to learn. Like when they, you learn about issues, whether it's mortgage brokers or chicken farmers or a business association. You do get to learn, and you understand the issues that different parts of the economy are facing, different sectors, and things. So I've always thought of that aspect as being a member of parliament as something, especially as a policy wonk or someone who likes to learn policy, as something very important. But there's a flip side to that these individuals, because of our roles, need to register and stuff. So I do find the balance to be a good one. If I can say that, my interactions, if I can personalize them, interactions with the office have always been great. With and I'm going to keep it that way, of course, and productive. But at the same time, all of us have a duty of responsibility to maintain as office holders. And in terms of the teleworking, because you do comment in the departmental plan, how has your work changed in that, in terms of is it made it more productive? Are you finding your employees overworked, stressed? We've been hearing that, especially for professionals, that the emails keep going on at all times of the day.
If I can say, I think with a team of 28 employees, you get to know your employees very well, and they are so dedicated and so professional, and everyone needs to step it up. There is no there's no depth. If everybody wears multitude of hats, but no one wears the same hat. So so it's demanding on them. And in order to be productive the way we had to be this year, because on all fronts our numbers went up. So for them to be able to meet the demand, they had to work extremely, extremely hard. So it has been tough to work from home, mainly because I think these Zoom things and the powers that go and all that becomes inefficient after a while, and people miss. I feel that sometimes people don't bother calling an employee to possibly chat about something instead of
Commissioner, I'm in full agreement. Time is up, but I'm in agreement with your final thoughts there.
Thank you, Mr. Sabero. We're going to turn to Madame Goudreau for the next 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bélanger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bélanger, of course, in 2 minutes and a few seconds, we haven't time to speak about all your recommendations, but I do have a specific question. Here you have a recommendation about lobbyists in Quebec. I'd like to know what you think about the advances that have been made in Quebec. I'm sorry, thank you for the question. Have they inspired me? Yes, they have. I have a very good working relationship with Mr. Boutier. We are in close touch. And I think that I've been able to inspire him as well. It's a two-way street. It's not exactly the same scheme, the same structure, so we do have to see how we can adapt each other's ideas when we do share them. But yes, I've looked at all the approaches all across the country and used them in my recommendations. Among the 11 recommendations, you have seen that I pay special attention to vigilance and neutrality and so on and so forth. That's something that I care a good deal about, as I've said. So are those elements touched on in those 11 recommendations? Are there any measures that you're suggesting that would help us avoid subjectivity? Well, the Act is for lobbyists, and indeed one of the first recommendations is that if there is a communication about an Act, that should necessarily be registered. So that's an important function of anyone communicating. So there's then a somewhat subjective analysis as to whether it's an important conversation or not. And I think this is something that MPs shouldn't have to weigh themselves. It should be by default that the conversation is noted and added to the registry. Very good. I've noticed that you have mentioned that you hope we could work together on the 11 recommendations. That's certainly something that I would support. Very often, our role in a parliamentary committee can be taken up by specific events, specific issues, and it would certainly be wise to work with you to prevent some of the problems that we've had to deal with of that nature, time-consuming, over the past year.
Angus now for the next 2.5 minutes, Mr.
Okay.
Angus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madame Belanger. Madame Belanger, you said you have turned over 3 reports, investigations to the RCMP. Is that the case?
I did in that last fiscal year, and I actually just submitted one in the last month. So I've added another one. But as of March 31st, I had sent 3 to the RCMP, 10 since my arrival.
Right. I guess my concern in terms of like the differences between the Conflict of Interest Act and lobbying is that the Ethics Commissioner found David McNaughton of Palantir guilty of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act for multiple acts of lobbying. You found him not guilty. The Ethics Commissioner has revealed levels of lobbying from the Kielburgers that I think surpasses anything we've ever known. But like we haven't seen anything from the lobbying commissioner. Are you investigating, or do you just think we need to change the laws so that they actually have to comply with the law?
Well, I can't confirm whether or not I'm investigating or where I am at my stage of reviewing that particular file. I don't believe that Commissioner Dion found that Mr. McLaughlin had been lobbying because that's not his power to decide. He said he had communications with
they weren't
public
allowed
office.
To speak to him. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Lobbying Act says, I didn't say that Mr. McNaughton did not lobby. He did. But he's entitled to up to a significant part of his work. Okay. What am I supposed to do? That's how the act is written.
I'm not arguing with your decision. I'm wondering. So a question then. Mr. Dion's interest with the Kielburgers was their friendship. So we have that they were going to lunch, they were having family brunches together. But Craig Kielburger said he wasn't going to hang out at the Morneau's house as a friend. He was going in a professional capacity. Going in a professional capacity, if that was someone who actually registered and followed the law, would we be able to see that on the lobbying register? Because we weren't aware of any of these kind of meetings and engagements and outings that they had together.
So in order for when the Lobbying Act applies, the status of the relationship is irrelevant. If someone communicates and lobbies, they are supposed to register. Right. The idea of the relationship, well, I was going to say the idea, once you're registered, you're subject to the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct actually says that you shouldn't be lobbying anyone with whom you have a relationship that could create a sense of obligations. So the code would kick into play in relation to any personal relationships that come into force that I would have to look into.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to turn to Mr. Kelly now for the next round of questions. Mr. Kelly.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me here at Ethics. Commissioner, so I wanted to make sure I got this. So you referred 10 investigations to the RCMP since you began, and you said 3 since 20.
I'm actually at 11. So I did 1 in the first year. I did 6 my second year, 3 in the last year, and I just did 1 recently.
Okay. And are you currently, can you tell us how many investigations you have underway right now?
4.
Okay. So you have 4 investigations that are currently underway. And so we're here to discuss the estimates. Do you have the resources to conduct in a smaller office? The ability to manage investigations may be trickier. Do you have the resources to manage your current caseload? And have you got room if you suddenly had additional work?
In the last year, we've doubled the preliminary assessments. And preliminary assessments is that first stage of whether or not we go into an investigation. The workload is heavy, and I only have a team with the director, a team of 3 investigations and 2 sort of support for the investigation team. One of them takes care of all the exemption from, so it's a small team. And I am looking at the workload right now and seeing if I can move resources around to be able to make sure that we can continue to be efficient. We are planning in the next year to map out our processes to see if there's some efficiencies to be gained. But of course, an investigation is an investigation. We need to get the documentation, we need to do interviews, and we need to analyze. I've got a great team of investigators and the staff in that compliance directorate. Plus, I have 2 wonderful lawyers that support them, and of course, I'm very much involved. So, could we have more staff? Obviously, but I'm limited in the budget that I have, and we move things around as much as we can.
Officers of Parliament are extremely important to parliamentarians, and we've seen the Auditor General, for example, have to actually turn away work and to turn down to not investigate areas that they deem important. You've not got to that. You've been able to conduct all the investigations that are necessary and before you.
I'm going to answer yes to that. I think I have not turned anything away. I don't think I ever would. I would find some things would have to give, but everything that comes in, we look into.
Okay, thank you. Now, in this past year, you combined the functions of different programs that were focused on the registry, education and outreach, compliance and enforcement into a newly unified registry service. How has this affected your operations?
Not really. What happened is that it hasn't really affected my operations, but what happened in the past is that our key results didn't really reflect the way that we did. So we just amalgamated. We have one program, and the program is to support and do the mandate that's required under the Lobbying Act. And then we have a few people that support in corporate services for that. So it hasn't really affected the way we run our business.
Okay. So how many full-time equivalents are dedicated to the registry service and compliance program?
The registry client services, there are 4, and the compliance, the registration team are 6, so that's 10.
Okay, and okay, go ahead.
And then we have a team that takes care of outreach and all of the reports that are required by government. We're subject to all the same requirements than any other big department. And so really there's 4 people there's 2 finance people, and then we've allocated, there's 1 support for IT. So we've allocated 4 for internal services, and everybody else is for the program.
All right. Mr. Chair, have I got any time left, or is that about it?
You do have a bit of time left. You've got approximately 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, with that, I think I'll just merely thank the commissioner for her service to Parliament and leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. For our final questions this afternoon, Ms. Shanahan, we'll turn to you to ask the final questions. And I believe if you'd like, you can split your time as well.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'll take it up. And yes, I do thank Madame Belanger for being here. I remember it was the lobbying commissioner at the time when I first became a member of Parliament that was giving us orientation, and it was a little scary, you know. So this idea and I believe it is in your recommendations that you know, that there would no be. I think the idea of the time, and please talk to me about that, but the idea of trying to allocate, you know, a certain portion of the time that somebody spends actually speaking to members of parliament and so on, it had something to do with proportionality, because otherwise it's every person who walks into my office that is potentially a lobbyist. And like Madame Goudreau, I would feel obliged to, like, I want to know if you're registered or not. Can you speak to us about that?
Well, currently, even if everybody that you speak to are lobbyists, that's okay. They have the requirement to register. Right now, what's happening is organizations and corporations don't need to register if it's not a significant part of their work. So they need to calculate whether or not in a month they've spent about 30 hours preparing and meeting with you in order to register. And for me, whether it's 2 hours, 1 hour, 10 minutes, it's what the substance of that conversation that matters. And that should be in the registry for transparency so that Canadians know who is meeting whom about what. And I think if that is the threshold where it's you talk to them, you register, the obligation will be on them. And it's not that difficult to register. And so you don't need to calculate whether you spoke to them 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour. You should take note of who you met. So if I ever reach out to you to confirm the information, you have it at hand. But the obligation is on the lobbyists to make sure that they are transparent about the communications they have with Canadian decision makers.
Okay, and did you mention the requirements between corporations and organizations? And I believe that is in your recommendation 3, and that's what my colleague, Ms. Latanzio, was curious about. So can you talk about what your thinking is there?
The recommendation 3 is making the requirements the same, I believe.
Yes, the requirements the same between the two.
I don't always have the order of them perfectly in my mind, but yes. The problem with right now with the registry is that corporations do not have to list employees who lobby less than 20%. In other words, in the registry, an organization has to list everybody that lobbies, but a corporation does not have to list those that lobby less than 20%. And what that means, the impact of that is that those individuals that are not in the registry are not subject to the code of conduct of lobbyists. And that's a problem. And so I think it's not a difficult, it's just put all the names of those who lobby on behalf of the corporation and organization. The organization have to do that. I don't know why corporations don't. So that's not a very difficult change to make.
Okay, interesting. And one of your other recommendations, I forget which one it was, but does talk about you'd like to have more details about the activities undertaken by each registrant. What are you looking for there?
So what I'd be interested is, and British Columbia has done this, when they do a monthly communication report. So when in the month they say, we've met with this particular designated public officer, it would be interesting to see whether this communication happened during lobby day. Was this during a sponsored travel? Was there hospitality offered? Was this during a conference? Was it a meeting? It's just details that could be in the monthly communication reports that just enhances transparency.
Well, that is important, I think, because I think that goes to my earlier question about sort of the quality of the interaction. I can just see, you know, going to a cocktail if we ever can, once more again, you know, and just crossing paths with someone, and the next thing you know, it's a thing, and so I think there is a distinction there between someone who's presenting you, multiple briefs.
But I think if a lobbyist takes the time to lobby you during that event in the evening, they should have an obligation to put in the registry that they lobbied you.
Okay, they weren't just being friendly, in other words.
I'm sure they were, but
thank you. Your time has now expired, and Commissioner, we want to thank you for being here. We certainly appreciate you answering our questions. We're thankful for the work that you do and continuing to report back to us. And so, on behalf of our committee, we want to thank you for being here. Colleagues, we will vote on the estimates at our next meeting, which is not this this next week is an out week, and then we have the following Monday, which is a holiday. So it will be the next Friday before we come together again. And we will have the Ethics Commissioner that will be with us, Mr. Dion, will join us for that Friday, May the 28th meeting, at which time I would recommend that we vote on all the estimates, and that will allow us to report back to the House of Commons before the deadline. If there's nothing further, colleagues, I think I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks so much, Commissioner. Really appreciate it.